Hello, my name is Kevin Alexander, and I am a DNR Coast District Planning Forester. Let me close this. In the Olympic region, I assist the district's 3 unit coordinators in creating and implementing the 5-year harvest action plan for the DNR's Coast District, which includes the OESF. Additionally, I am also the point contact between the research PIs for the T3 experiment and the field staff who will be conducting the harvest and silvicultural operations. I assist in the research side of the experiment by providing local agency and industry knowledge for the creation of timber sales associated with the experiments. I also coordinate with the field staff who need to know the where and the when that the research takes place and possibly how to do it. I started working with this project after the watersheds had been identified and pre-treatment monitoring had begun. In this map, you can see we zoomed into the T3 watersheds, and I just have the truss lands underneath the watersheds. And throughout the harvest planning process, several questions have to be answered, such as, what do we have to do? What do we have to work with? In that, I needed to identify the constraints and the flexibilities within the project. For instance, can we incorporate units external to the research watersheds? What is the intensity of the harvest and how will it be measured? Is the harvest target based on volume removed or harvest acres or something else? How much time do I have to create the action plan? And how do we get these sales together? What are the research needs? Do we organize sales by road systems or research criteria? Will the sales sell? We really had to take a look at the economics of each sale. Do the prescriptions cause undue burdens on the purchasers or lower harvest volumes? What are the access needs? And are there any, are these typical contracts? What is the expectation of tracking silvicultural activities that aren't uniform over a sale or unit? And finally, how do we get research staff and timber sales staff on the same page? One of the commitments of the T3 experiments is to not reduce harvest levels lower than that would normally occur on the landscape. Looking at historic harvest levels on the OESF, since the State Lands Habitat Conservation Plan took effect, in conjunction with the most recent run of the modeled sustainable harvest calculation, we see that approximately 1% of the land base across the OESF is expected to be harvested per year in the next decade. Since this is a 10-year research commitment, that would put the harvest level at 10% per watershed. However, there are 4 control watersheds that need to be accounted for. The percentage of the controls were applied to the harvest watersheds, raising the harvest level to 13 1/3%. In order to allow for variation in harvestable timber, and we added a variation to the intensity of plus or minus 10%. And that put the harvest intensity between 12 and 14 2/3%. Now that I knew how much we needed to find, I started work on my remote review. This quickly narrows down the areas for potential harvest by gathering stand and inventory data. Since the research would not be harvesting, habitat designated for T&E species, these stands were automatically removed from the harvest plan. For example, here in the BA watershed, the northern spotted owl habitat, old forest habitat, represented in purple, and the marble murrelet habitat, represented in red and orange, were excluded from the plan. I also set aside recently harvested ground. For example, I could automatically remove any stands that are 25 years or younger, which are represented in the black. This review narrowed down the places that I had to field verify, saving me quite a bit of time. In verifying my field review, I looked at its general fit to how it actually looked out there. I walked through each stand and took a few measurements to calibrate my eye on what I was seeing. However, the intensity was fairly low at this point, and I mostly relied on my experience. Some measurements included stream typing for expected buffer extents, stand assessments to determine if volume targets were on track, or if there was something that would reduce the volume, such as defect or blowdown that wasn't captured in the latest inventory. I also looked at potential expenses, such as what it would cost to build a new road or upgrade an existing road. When finished with my assessment, I had a good idea of where the boundaries would be for each unit and which stands were a better fit than others for harvest and combination in a timber sale. The intent of the research is to be as similar to a typical timber sale as possible. This generally means that aggregating units that share a similar haul route and preventing overlap of timber sales. As we can see on the map, several of the watersheds are adjacent to one another, and oftentimes the ridge line that separates the watersheds have a road on it. This means that a sale may incorporate several different aspects from different research projects. Once you have put all your units together and created your timber sale, you can start the process by organizing the specialist needs for the timber sale consultation. This lets everybody else involved in the process know that the sale has been planned and they need to start coordinating in order to get the ball rolling. The viability of the sale all comes down to whether the sale of the timber will generate enough money to keep all parties whole. That means that it has to carry both direct and indirect costs. The costs associated, or the direct costs associated, are generally what is taken into account when determining the purchaser's bid value. The indirect costs can be looked at as a value that helps to determine the minimum sale value. From the state land's perspective, it has to generate enough revenue that will cover the land management costs for the agency. This amount is a percentage of the sale value, and even though the sale may make a positive net gain for the trust, if the sale value isn't high enough, the DNR who gets paid at the end suffers the shortfall. When I conducted my appraisal, it was during a low in the market, and all the plant sales came out positive in net gains except for one. However, that sale just missed the mark. This bodes well as we are currently seeing positive gains in the market, and it won't take much to put that sale over the mark. Now that we have our sales planned, we have to track what activities are planned for each sale and potentially each unit. Tracking activities within a single sale can get complex fairly quickly. This is the Claylock East timber sale. It's a fairly average sized timber sale for the district, and the harvest prescription is planned early cereal for the entire sale. This is simple enough. However, it is in two different watersheds, with their primary harvest difference being the application of stream buffers. In the DP watershed, the OESF landscape buffer widths will be used, and in the DA watershed, the variable width buffers will be used. If that isn't difficult enough, the post-harvest silviculture breaks down the sale even further. In the DP watershed, all the units have post-harvest silvicultural activities prescribed on the OESF forest landscape plan. However, there will be 2 units associated with acoustic monitoring. In the DA watershed, you can see that there are multiple silvicultural prescriptions. The units with unassigned prescriptions revert to the OESF landscape plan, while the other units get either a ethnoforestry prescription or a polyculture prescription. And in the unit to the east here, this is one unit, you can see that it gets both the polyculture and the ethnoforestry prescription split. Oops, sorry about that. And it gets a red alder underplanting in the RMZ in the center. With this level of complexity, it is important that information comes from the fewest individuals as possible. Prior to the sale or the start of the pre-work process, I will explain the changes to the normal layout procedures, and I will provide maps, shapefiles, and descriptions of where the desired work will happen. It is my hope that I'll also be able to get out there in front during the layout of the first few sales and assist the foresters in the implementation and the prescriptions. After that, I will change to spot checking on how the plans are implemented and verify with the PIs that their intent is successfully being carried out. Post-harvest, it is important to get units restocked. However, planting prescriptions will differ from unit to unit and even may differ within a particular unit, as we saw in Claylock East. These units will be these needs will be relayed during the layout process in order to order the appropriate amount of seedlings, which is generally a 2-year process from ordering to planting the seeds or the trees. Planting locations can be accounted for in our land and resource management software. Implementation may require PIs to mark in the field the locations and monitoring the sites and prescription boundaries. After that, the focus switches to research monitoring and out of my hands.